Where did you go?
Why does the universe keep doing this to me?
Everyone's favorite sociopath is back, and in a way that we haven't seen before. Part 1 of Season 4 of Netflix's You just released. And we never thought that we'd find Joe Goldberg in a situation like this. But the twists of this new season take us on an adventure unlike anything we have seen from the show yet. In this video, we'll be breaking down everything we saw from Season 4, Part 1 of Netflix's You, covering our 5 biggest takeaways from the first part of the season, explaining the ending, and discussing what is to come in the second half. So let's dive in, starting with our first takeaway. Number 1, a new beginning. After the wild Season 3 ending, we weren't sure where we would find Joe Goldberg. But things pick up rather quickly as soon as we discover his whereabouts. Season 3 ended with Joe in France, on the hunt for Marion. However, Season 4 begins with us finding Joe in a university classroom in London. Well, more accurately, Joe is now Professor Jonathan Moore, teaching a class on literature with a new identity. Although he talks about how he still misses Marion in his internal monologue, Joe slowly starts to find new interests going forward. As the episode goes on, we learn that Joe did find Marion in Europe, and she was terrified of him, recognizing him as a murderer. Later in London, Joe is confronted by a man named Elliot Tannenberg, who happens to be an assassin hired by Love's father, and he tells Joe that he is prepared to kill him. However, he provides an alternative approach, offering Joe a new identity in exchange for some money. We learn that this is where Joe receives his new name and an opportunity for a new life. Elliot also tells Joe to kill Marion, but he chooses not to, showing maybe some growth from Joe. Still, Joe immediately falls into his old habits, as he realizes his apartment provides a clear view into his coworkers. He tries to fight the urge to get involved, but as we have seen over the past 3 seasons, Joe is not the best at holding back his impulses. Taking us to our second takeaway. Number 2, same old tricks with a different spin. No matter what happens, it seems that Joe will never be able to escape his old tricks, whether it's a curse or perpetually bad decision-making. And the action in the first episode picks up quickly. His attempt not to get involved in the life of his neighbors falls apart when he steps in to help Kate when he sees her being mugged on the way to her car. Her husband, Malcolm, comes by to thank Joe for saving her from the attackers and invites Joe to a party. At the party, Joe is not in his favorite company, as he silently judges the rich celebrities, their party, and their personalities. However, it wasn't all bad. The one conversation that he did enjoy was with author and potential mayor candidate, Reese Montrose. Joe talked to Reese about enjoying his book, and the two seem to have a common ground based in a bad childhood. The two seem to understand each other quite well. But we will find out that they understand each other even better than we might think. At the end of the party, Joe is way past drunk, and Malcolm takes him home. When Joe wakes up, he finds Malcolm dead with a knife in his chest, thinking that he murdered Malcolm for talking badly about Marion. Or seemingly. When Joe starts receiving text messages through a mysterious app on his phone, it turns out he may not have been the killer after all. But he did handle the disposal of the body quite well, which seems to have interested the real killer. However, the killer also knows Joe is not really Jonathan Moore. In an interesting new angle, Joe is the one being stalked this time, placing him right in the middle of a whodunit murder mystery. As it develops, it takes us to our next takeaway. Number 3, eat the rich. On top of the sociopathic thrills of Netflix's You provides, it always seems to have an interesting social commentary through the eye of Joe Goldberg. In Season 2, we saw a critique of the self-absorbed mindsets in Los Angeles, while Season 3 was a critique of the stuck-up and condescending culture that exists in suburbia. Now Season 4 spotlights a brand new sociological study, the rich and wealthy. Upon his time in London, Joe gets wrapped up in a group of rich and high-status friends. It is this group of friends that leads to trouble, as Malcolm's murder is only just the beginning, serving as the first of several murders that affect this high-class group. This puts everyone on high alert from the quote, "eat the rich" killer. Still, all of the elite parties and high-status get-togethers can't cover up the superficial nature of the group, centered right in the middle of it all thanks to his stalker. Joe is forced to navigate all of the complex and often fake relationships to see who is responsible for the murders and put a stop to it all while appearing like a suspect himself. Altogether, the complex system and convoluted social conventions make the murder mystery even harder to solve. At the end, though, it all comes together, bringing us to the next takeaway. Number 4, the crazy ending of Part 1 explained. The ending of Part 1 is just as twisted and dramatic as you might expect after 3 seasons of the show. The episode begins with Joe finding Kate hovering over Gemma's dead body while holding a knife. Joe isn't sure if Kate is the killer, but he plays along and helps her clean up the body. Then, she becomes suspicious when seeing how good Joe is at cleaning up dead bodies. But when Joe explains the Malcolm situation, the two are on each other's side. At one point, Phoebe discovers blood-covered carpet in Kate's room, but isn't too fazed upon learning that Gemma is dead. The lack of empathy amongst this group of wealthy friends is a common theme throughout this season. Meanwhile, Adam and Roald conspire to take care of Joe. Roald finds Joe searching Gemma's dead body and points a gun at him, claiming him to be the Eat the Rich killer. Then, Joe is put in front of the friend group with Roald ready to shoot him. Roald explains all of the evidence against him, But again, the friends are oddly apathetic, even as Joe seems to be on the verge of execution. And surprisingly, for the first time, Joe actually appears innocent. Instead of shooting Joe then and there, Roald allows him to run, embracing the chase. In a tribute to the story of the most dangerous game, Roald allows Joe to run and chases him through the forest with his shotgun. When Joe is able to tackle Roald in the forest to protect himself, things take a shocking twist. Someone comes to pick up the loose shotgun, and we discover that it is Rhys Montrose. We find Joe waking up, chained inside a cellar next to an unconscious Roald, and Rhys confesses himself as the killer with a clear hatred for the rich. Ultimately, it makes sense, as Joe and Rhys have many similarities and an interesting bond, as we discovered as early as episode 1. Rhys even explains to Joe that he was trying to save him, just like Joe says to those he murders for. It makes even more sense when Rhys says that Joe has inspired him, and says that he wants Joe on his side. Ultimately, we see a mirror of Joe when looking at Rhys. It is always interesting to see Joe on the other side of a psychopath's plan. Even after finding out his crimes, Joe interestingly even still refers to Rhys as a good man in a cruel world. But that quickly changes. Rhys tells Joe to kill Roald so the two can frame it as a suicide. But when Joe tries to escape instead, Rhys sets the cellar on fire and leaves the two to die. But Joe and Roald are both able to break out of the chains and escape. Rhys is long gone as well. In the end, everyone is able to return to London, and the events are just referred to on the news as another attack by the Eat the Rich killer, taking us to the final part of our list. Number 5, what's next for part 2? At the end of the final episode, Joe makes the surprising decision to turn down the opportunity to get a drink with Kate and develop their relationship because he is afraid of hurting her. Does this mean we are actually seeing Joe grow as a person? This turn of events provides us with a brand new angle for the rest of Season 4. After turning down Kate's offer for a drink, he says he would normally chase after her but, quote, "I can't because I'm already in a relationship with you, Rhys." As Joe turns to the TV, we see Rhys shockingly announce his candidacy for mayor, making things even more convoluted. Joe isn't going to let it go though, as he says, quote, "I know who you are now, Rhys, and I'm coming for you." So it's pretty clear that the second part of the season is going to focus on this hunt. This just might be the tallest task that Joe has had to take on yet, leaving us with many questions. We have to wonder if Joe will be taking on this hunt alone, or if he will be joined by anyone else. After all, the group of friends is not one for empathy and concern for much besides themselves. Will Joe end up telling anyone who Rhys really is? In the teaser for the second part of the season, we see Joe stalking Rhys and even confronting him, so we know the action is going to pick up, but we don't know how. We do see that characters like Kate, Phoebe, and Nadia are going to return, so we wonder what their roles will be. We also don't think that Joe will be able to let go of Kate completely. In the teaser, Joe vows to stop Rhys, but Rhys doesn't appear that he is going to go down easily, especially because Joe won't be able to kill Rhys using his normal strategies. After all, how do you kill someone running for mayor and hide it? Part 2 of Season 4 will release on Netflix on March 9th, so we will be here ready to see what happens next. So there we have it, a full breakdown of Part 1 of You Season 4. What did you think of the ending to Part 1? What do you think will happen in Part 2? Let us know your thoughts down in the comments. Make sure you subscribe so you don't miss any updates as we wait for the release of Part 2 of Season 4. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.